The Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority has dismissed claims that the newly proposed amendments to firearms regulations will hinder the operations of private security firms. There has been a wave of criticism mounting against proposed amendments to PSIRA, with industry stakeholders warning of potentially devastating consequences for the sector and public safety. The proposed amendments relate to the private security industry firearms regulations, which were published in the Government Gazette on the 28th of March 2025 by the Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu. To clarify this, we are joined by PSIRA CEO Manabela Chauke. Manabela, thank you for your time. It's good to have you here on the program.
Good morning, Ian, and good morning to the viewers.
So let's start at the top, because I think that this is what the focus is about, is claims that the proposed regulations will actually undermine the ability of private security firms to protect lives and property and could result in job losses and business closures. Perhaps you want to address that.
Yes, I think that's a misconception of what the proposed regulations are meant to address. There is no job losses that will be lost as a result of these regulations. And we certainly don't intend to disarm the industry by bringing these regulations. Rather, what we are trying to do is to enhance accountability of the private security industry with regard to the use of the weapons and minimize the risk to the public.
In terms of the industry sector, they're saying the draft regulations are vague, they're unworkable, and they're a serious threat to public safety and are not going to curb crime, but rather disarm those that are actually trying to prevent it. How do you respond to this?
Well, in terms of the question of whether they are vague, I think it depends on how they read them. From whatever context these regulations are meant for general application of the private security industry. They're certainly not meant for individuals, and they're not meant for people who own firearms in their own private spaces, but they're meant for those who provide a private security service to people who pay for it and often encroach in public spaces. And I think we will assist quite a lot in trying to unpack what the regulations are, and certainly this is a draft. People are meant to send their own representations to it.
So let's get a little bit of clarity here. Do the proposed regulations constitute a ban on the use of firearms by private security personnel?
Not at all. A ban is a total ban. We're saying that the default firearm for you to use is a handgun as well as a shotgun. That's a default firearm. We're saying you can use these firearms in malls, we can use it in parks, you can use it everywhere, but you have to provide us with a risk analysis, and you have to provide us with all other, means that you have looked at from a risk analysis point of view to determine if there is any alternatives, but the use of the firearm itself is provided for. I mean, all those places, it would be upset for us to ban firearms completely. We can't do that. All we're saying is that let's get rid of the random use of certain categories of firearms in spaces where they are not necessarily required.
Okay. Tell us which ones. I mean, when we talk about certain categories of firearms, what are you alluding to?
Let's take a mall, for instance. If you go to a mall, there's already mall security that's looking after the mall. They are armed security. And we don't certainly wish to see a person who rocks up in a mall with 12 bodyguards, with heavily armed rifles and so on, where there are children and there are members of the public that can be endangered. That's what we're referring to.
Okay, so
that kind of person must make a risk analysis.
So is this more for, are we aiming at more, obviously we talk about private security, but you've given an example of somebody that perhaps arrives and has got bodyguards. But if you're living in a complex, or if it's an office block or something like that, you don't necessarily have a problem, but it's these guys that come in as bodyguards or whatever the case may be, carrying these very heavy weapons. Is that what you're aiming at?
We're aiming at those type of people. If you live in an estate, your estate would have done the risk analysis and say, to protect our people in an estate, this is the sort of firearms we want. And the risk analysis will be very clear. And so if anybody comes into that space, that person must then abide by the rules of that estate. I mean, we're saying you don't need to use a rifle in a place where there's already a rifle. There's already risk analysis that has been done. You have to do a risk analysis.
Okay. So these proposed measures, do they align with international norms? Is it something that we've already seen in place in many countries?
Certainly. In many countries, firearms are strictly controlled. We are probably one of the countries which has got the less strictest use of firearms. We cannot even account for those firearms. So that's what we're trying to do. This is in line with international practice. We know that firearms are deadly. We know that we have to be able to tell and hold people to account for the use of firearms.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems, and certainly responses that we do get, is saying that there's possibly a danger that these reforms will mostly affect law-abiding, regulated security personnel, while criminals remain heavily armed. And this is a problem where, you know, I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but the reality is if we're taking it from those that are there to protect and allowing those that we do know still have these and causing untold problem with a country with an incredibly high crime rate, do you think this will not affect that?
We don't think so. We think that already the people who are providing a professional service already knows these rules and already have to abide by it. We're saying we want to be able to hold those who use these weapons accountable. And accountability means that the person must be able to tell us how he used the firearms, for what reason. Certainly, if you're saying that we are trying to disarm the industry or we're trying to give an advantage to criminals, that is not the purpose at all. If we were trying to do that, we'd have completely banned the use of firearms in all public spaces. That's not what we do.
Yeah. Have you been engaging with the private sector, the private security sector, in a transparent manner about the newly proposed amendments to the firearms regulations? Because they feel it's a bit blurry and they don't necessarily feel like they've been consulted enough.
Well, this is the opportunity. I mean, the only way in law for you to consult is to publish a gazette and invite people to come and make representations, to tell us what alternatives do they have if they're opposing what we are proposing. There's certainly a lot of engagements that we're going to do with the industry very closely. In fact, we will be also targeting the most prominent of our key stakeholders and say, tell us what you propose, but accountability needs to happen. There's no way that we will go about without accounting for firearms. We face accountability questions on a daily basis from South Africans who want to know, what are you doing about these people? What are you doing about people who abuse firearms, who are misusing them, and people who go all over the show? This place has become a war zone. We don't certainly wish to perpetuate that kind of a status.
Yeah. So the draft amendment was published, I mean, not too long ago. It was the end of March, the 28th of March. What's the response been like?
We have over 6,000 representations already made, and we're just at the beginning. After the draft representations, we'll be looking at all the considerations, and we will be going into consultations countrywide. We anticipate already that the minister will be considering an extension to allow much more, engagement of parties who are concerned about this, so that everyone at the end of the day can understand what is the purpose of bringing accountability to the industry.
Very quickly, as we wrap up, we know that stakeholders have until the 25th of April to comment on this. Is there a chance for an extension to this deadline? I know it's a premature question, I imagine, but would you be open to this? Because, it seems that private security businesses, they don't want this to get out of hand, where their job is to protect their clients, and yet taking the one form of protection away is something that could pose a massive risk to them.
Yes, the minister will be considering all of that after he receives all the representations. As I said, already 6,000 representations have been made, and the minister will take his decision at the end of the cut-off date.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting you, but thank you very, very much. Manabela Chauke, the PSIRA CEO, he's speaking to us about the newly proposed amendments to firearms regulations, and something we'll follow up on a lot. We've got out until the 25th of April, but there may be an extension depending on what the Minister has to say about that.